Hey guys, um, just played a game with the wing Gambit against the French defence. Now if you're an e4 player and you just don't know what to do and you're faced with e6, the French, I mean I play the French a lot myself as black, get very good results with it. A lot of people just hate to see e6 with the French defence. Well, here's a completely alternative way to go about it. I mean, the normal principled move would be to play d4 and then you're going to get d5, and then you can either get the exchange variation or you can get the advance, or you can bring your knight out with the various options like the winnower and stuff like that. But this is completely different. So my coach has taught me to try this one out, because it does throw a lot of French players off their guard. Now, I don't think I played this game particularly well. It's an unrated 10-minute game against the 1200 rated player, and of course they proceed with d5. You can pretty much play d5 on move 2 with the French against almost anything that white plays. Now here, we don't proceed to compete for the center. Instead you push e5, right? And then c5 is the next move, and it looks here like black has got a really good grip over the middle, but now we go Gambit style, Opa Gambit style, with b4, inviting black to capture on b4. And now black doesn't know where he is, right? This is uncharted territory for most beginners. So now I push a3, and black takes, and I could take this, I mean it's guarded once by the bishop there. I could take this with my knight now and proceed to have some fun, but there's no rush to take that pawn. That pawn is going nowhere. So now I push d4 and block up the center. Queen comes out with check, block it with the bishop. Queen retreats, and now I'd simply develop my other bishop, getting ready to castle, bishop to d7, and white castles. So I've got a nice development lead already. My opponent is actually 2 pawns in front, but that isn't everything. So we have the bishop comes out, and now I decide to grab the pawn, so I'm just 1 pawn down now, and bishop takes knight, which is probably a decent move actually from black, so maybe I shouldn't have captured at that point. The thing you have to notice is we've got these 2 rows of deadlock pawns in the middle of the board, and that means that these bishops cannot get through. None of these bishops can get through that mass of pawns right in the center. The center is blocked. The way is shut. It was made by those who are dead, and the dead keep it. The way is shut. Anyway, so black decides to trade off his dark squared bishop. I recapture, and now of course he's removed one of the minor pieces that in the way of his king, and we have a trade of light squared bishops now. So I'm the only one with a bishop on the board. He develops his knight. I attack the queen. Queen moves, and we trade queens. So now black is a pawn up, but he's got these doubled and isolated pawns on the a file, although he's getting ready to castle. So I wouldn't say that I've got really a measurable advantage in this game. I now double up my rooks with the idea of, if I can get this guy away from guarding there, I could drop down there, force an exchange of rooks, and then the king's going to have to move off the back rank, which would be fine for me. He brings his knight out, and I decide to attack that knight with my bishop. Now, so the idea is that if I had another move now, I'd take the knight, probably knight takes, then rook up, rook takes rook, rook takes rook, and then the king has to move, and I win the other rook. Okay, that's the idea. But he castles straight away. Now I guess if I could persuade this knight to vacate the premises, then I could grab his partner, that they are defending each other. But there's no real way to do that, so I come after the pawn. He attacks my bishop, and I decide here to retreat my bishop back down to e3. This bishop, I would say now, is a weaker piece than these knights, just for reasons that we've explained with this gummed up center of the board. Okay, so now he pushes his pawn where it's defended by the knight. Now I bring my bishop down to attack the pawn a second time, and now we have a proposed trade of rooks. I decline that idea and move across to a3, so now I've got 3 pieces looking at this pawn. Rook now comes down attacking the undefended pawn on c2. and I do an X-ray defense. So the rook from 3 comes down to A2, defending the pawn through the attacker. And we have a trade of rooks, and now black is eyeing up a back rank mate idea. Clearly my king can only move on the back rank, so if he can get his rook to B1, he might be okay. Although, one thing you have to remember, is this really a back rank threat? Because I have bishop looking at E1, and I have knight looking at E1. Although, the knight is also the defender of this pawn, so here I decide to push G3 and just give my king an escape square. Rook now comes down to defend the pawn, and I just tuck my king away in G2. And now it gets really quite close, this game. But we do have a very useful ending, and one that you need to know. So I'm going to show you the rest of the game. So pawn to C3, adding a second defender to this guy because he's attacked twice. King starts to mobilize, I start to mobilize my king, I attack the knight, and here in fact, yeah. So this is not just mobilizing the king, right? Because when I noticed here, when the knight came here, one thing you should get into the habit of doing, right, is saying, where can that piece go from where it's just moved? Okay, can't go there because get taken, get taken, get taken, right? Can't go there because it'll get taken, can't go there or there because his own pawns are on it. So this knight actually only has one square, right, which is back where it came from on E7. Now, I figure that I could attack the knight with this, but then that would give the knight this square. But in fact, I guess I could have just captured it with my knight there. So I didn't need to move my king at all. Okay. Now he moves his king there, blocking off the knight's only escape. So G4 wins the knight. And now black attacks my knight, pinning it on the king. King moves. So I'm actually up a bishop at this point in time. Now here I could grab the pawn, I grab the pawn, and he decides to trade off his knight for my bishop. So I'm actually a knight up at this point, but it doesn't stay that way. Rook comes back to defend the pawn, I advance my rook, just keeping the king at bay, means the king can't proceed up the board. King moves there, I decide to throw a pawn up, king moves again, I push my king up. Just general ideas of breaking through. I mean, the pawns are equal on this side of the board, but I've got a knight that may come in handy. Now we have a proposed trade of rooks. And I figure, okay, well, one option is we trade rooks. Pawn takes, and now basically it's this knight's job to guard the promotion square. Okay. However, that just doesn't feel like it's guaranteed winning to me. So I drop my rook back, he pushes his pawn, I push a pawn. Don't know why I didn't trade pawns there. He gives check, block it, trade pawns. And we have some messing around, general messing around. Check, check again, king up, pawn down, king back. So we're just dillying around here, okay? And, okay. So now I move my king up. He pushes his pawn. Now I could capture the pawn, but I'd lose my knight or my rook, so that's not going to work. So I push another pawn, he brings the king up, and now I grab the pawn. Okay, because basically the king's going to come to here with a fork on knight and rook. So I'm going to lose my knight, whatever happens, okay? So takes on A3, come down. Here I guess I might have been better off putting my rook here, although all of this is blocked off. So I think if I'd done that, then this rook might have had a kind of a perpetual check option of just checking me here and then forcing me away from this pawn. I don't know. Wasn't too confident. Anyway, so bring my knight across to defend. King moves up, check, moves back. Okay, we have some toing and froing, and it's all equal on the board. We have 4 files with pawns. I give a check, he moves there, so my pawn's going to fall. My pawn falls, okay? And now I decide to reroute my rook around, targeting the back of this light squared pawn structure, right? So I'm now on the back foot. I'm in a bad position. Pawn advances. rook up with check, king moves, rook to the 7th rank, attacking this guy. And my opponent here makes a blunder. Right? Plays king to f3, thinking about rook takes f4. Okay? What he didn't factor in, and what he didn't notice with 3 minutes on his clock, is I just took a pawn on the f-file. And he goes ahead and captures, and I capture his rook. Okay? And now we are in another very, very interesting ending situation. Okay, I'll bring my rook to the side, give check, pin the pawn, king goes here, give check, and he's got a few options. He can retreat the king, or he can go ahead and promote. And now I have the inside line. Okay, what I have to do is I have to eliminate these pawns. What my opponent has to do is he has to get up to where my pawns are, right? However, in a foot race, now I think, because remember, my king can't go on any of these squares, so it has to take the long route round to get to this pawn, okay? Now, if my opponent had put his king there, I think we'd have had a drawn situation. But he didn't. He moved inwards, okay? And this is just too late. He's grabbed my pawn, right? But look at where the pawns are. My pawns are on the 5th rank. His pawns are on the 6th rank, right? So my remaining pawn only has 3 jumps to go. Any of his is going to have 5. And that's just arithmetically doesn't work. I grab the pawn, okay? Looks very equal, but bottom line is my pawn's nearer to the line. So I come across, he pushes a pawn, doesn't matter. I get a queen. Right, now, check. So this is very important. Now I have covered this in a previous video. This exact situation, you've got a king and a queen against a king and a pawn that is about to promote. Now, when you do this, there's a pattern that you have to know, right? You keep checking the king until he goes here, in front of his own pawn, and then your king can advance up the board, right? However it goes. So, check, king moves, check, king moves, check again, king goes behind the pawn, my king advances, right? So every time you don't look, he takes a step, okay? This is the Weeping Angels ending. Okay, give check, because the king's out. King hides, advance my king. King comes here, check again, right? King hides. Now, I cannot advance my king to here. Why not? Because, oh, I can actually. No, I was thinking it was a stalemate situation. It's not, of course, is it? Could put my king here, because he still has 1 square to go to. Anyway, so I bring my queen down with check, check again, he hides. Now I realise that I can put my king there because he does have 1 square, h1, king moves to, well, he would have to move to h1, he actually resigns, because queen takes g2 will be checkmate. So there you go, nice interesting little opening. e4, e6, knight to f3. Your French player will play d5, should play d5 all the time, against anything at all, and you advance e5. Okay, then when the c pawn comes out, b4, and Captain French doesn't know what to do, where to go. Okay, so this is one that I'm going to be playing more of. Every time I see this move on move 2, I'm going to be trying to remember to practice this. I think Mio from Hanging Pawns has got a, like he does, very in-depth theoretical video on this opening. So if you're really, really keen, I recommend you check it out and try and make some notes on that. But this is the basic setup that you're going for, and b4. All right. Now from here, it can obviously go in multiple different directions. It's chess after all. But, you know, if you've been looking for a way to try and defuse the French because it just frustrates the heck out of you, this is a good way to go. You can't really go far wrong. Okay, so there you go. Hope that's been useful for you. If you've been looking for a response to the French or an anti-French, then maybe the wing gambit is also for you. Now, there's also a version of this you can play against the Sicilian, which is interesting as well, but not going to cover that one today. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching. See you later.